So we're just going to dive right in. So there's kind of four major areas that I wanted to go over in terms of using Zoom. The first is logging in, um, and not necessarily just like on the Zoom program, but on the Zoom website, because that's kind of where all the magic happens as far as being able to customize things and set the settings the way that you want is logging in on the website and playing around with stuff. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the myriad of different settings in Zoom that you can customize, and kind of focusing on the ones that are you really need to know about. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to skip over, but the most important stuff, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about scheduling meetings and the two ways in which we can do that. And then we're going to do a little bit of a feature comparison, talking about Zoom on the iPads versus using Zoom on the Chromebooks. And I guess I'd apply iPads and Android, because there are little differences between what device you use Zoom on. Chromebooks are different from iPads. They're both different from a Mac or a PC. But from my understanding, the iPad and Android experiences are pretty near identical. So when I talk about the iPads, I am talking about Android as well. So that does also cover our 3 to 6 crowd with their tablets. And obviously our crowd if there's two, until we get the Apple TVs out there. So and then questions as we go along, and at the end, and then hopefully we can call it a school day. So so the magic, like I said, the magic all happens on the Zoom website, which is zoom.us. And so if you're not familiar with this website, this is where I go, especially because with the Zoom app on the Chromebooks, there really isn't a whole lot that you can configure there. You can basically sign in and start a meeting, and that's about it. So if you want to customize anything, you really need to get to this website. And then you would have, if you're not logged in, you'll see a login there. And you can log in with your MS8052 Google account, which makes it super easy. And then once you're logged in, this is usually where you end up, is on a tab that talks about the meetings that you have that are scheduled. These are meetings that you schedule. I don't think it includes meetings that other people have invited you to. It's just the ones that you've created. So so this list has been dwindling down as I've been getting through all the Zooms lately. So so this is usually where you would show up. You can see all of your upcoming meetings. You can also see all of your previous meetings, and then there's your personal room. So when you're using Zoom, you kind of have a personal, they call it a personal Zoom, or they call it I think it's PMI, personal meeting ID. And that's something that you can use repeatedly, so that you don't necessarily have to keep sending different Zoom links to people for different meetings. You can kind of run off of one and have it work. So and then meeting templates. This is one that I actually just started playing around with, and I think we'll talk about it a little bit later. But it kind of allows you to set up a meeting in a certain way, and then create it as a template. And then when you go to create another meeting, when you use the template, it copies all those settings, so you don't necessarily have to manually do each thing one by one, which is pretty neat. So under personal room, this is where you would go to edit the settings that you would use for your personal room. So we're going to talk about settings here in a little bit. So there's the settings right here, and that talks about, or I shouldn't say talks about, that goes over a lot of the different settings and defaults for making a new meeting in general. But the settings that you have configured in your personal room, if you select that you're creating something with your personal room, it automatically copies those settings over. So you kind of have like a couple of different sets of defaults that build off of each other. So there's your personal meeting ID. You can change it, but I wouldn't unless you're having issues with hackers from the future actually getting into your personal meeting room. Passcode, you can uncheck it. I definitely wouldn't recommend that you have a Zoom room with no passcode. And you can also enable a waiting room. So you can have one or the other or both. You can configure it the way that you want. In this section where it talks about video, this is what the setting is for people as they enter the room. So if you, right now the host is set to off, so when I start a meeting, my camera's turned off. It's not on by default. Same thing for participant. Right now it's off, so when you come into the Zoom room, your camera will be off. Under audio, there's a couple of different settings that you could use. I would just keep it the same telephone and computer audio. This gives people who are on the road or otherwise unable to access a Zoom meeting by computer the opportunity to dial a phone number and connect into your Zoom meeting instead. If you wanted to, you could select one or the other. I always just keep that third one checked, and I don't think we're going to be dealing with anything related to third-party audio. Some other things, enable join before host. That just means that if that's enabled, then if someone shows up to a meeting, then before you're in there, then they will end up in the meeting on their own, waiting for you. Or if you have the waiting room enabled, they'll be in the waiting room until you get to the meeting and then admit them. Muting participants on entry just means that when they come in, kind of similar to up here with the participant off, just means that for audio, when they come in, it's off. Only authenticated users can join. I wouldn't check this option because anybody that doesn't have a Zoom account is not going to be able to get into your Zoom, and we definitely shouldn't assume that parents and students have that access. So breakout room pre-assign, I actually haven't played around with this at all, but if you are using break rooms, I think that you can assign people to rooms, but I think it might depend on usernames. So this option, I don't know that that's going to work for us. And then the last one is automatically record meeting, and we'll talk about recording a little bit later, what that means. I've had a couple of people ask about alternative hosts, and my understanding of it, and this might be wrong, is that you can establish someone as an alternative host if they have a paid Zoom account. Because I know that somebody tried to set an ed tech as an alternative host and it wouldn't let them. And the ed techs don't have the paid accounts, only the teachers do. So I'm thinking it might be related to that, but I'm not 100% sure. But in any case, once you have your settings configured the way that you want in your personal Zoom room, you're going to hit save. Or if you change something and you didn't want to change it, then you could hit cancel. We're now going to look at the settings tab. So if I go down here on the left side of my screen, I'm going to click on settings. And then this is where there are so many options in here. It can be a little bit overwhelming. So I definitely want to make sure that we just talk about the essential stuff that you need to know. There's a ton of stuff in here you really don't need to deal with. So we're going to go over just the really important stuff. The first thing under security, so waiting room. So again, in your personal meeting room, if you have waiting room on, then whether this is on or off, for a personal meeting, it'll be on. So this setting is basically for any other meetings that you create that aren't a part of your personal meeting room. And you may want to use your personal meeting room for everything, but you may also want to set up meetings in a little bit of a different way so you can kind of segment them out. You may not necessarily want all these different groups of people to have all of the same login information. So, for instance, for me, I have a meeting that I have set for the 12 o'clock Tech Wednesday, and then one for this, and then one for my office hours. I think the office hours are my personal Zoom. I'm not sure, but there can be benefit to segmenting out. So anything that's not personal meeting room related, with this checked, then by default, when you create that meeting, this will be on. And you can go back and turn it off later if you want, but it'll be on. Waiting room options. So you can make it so that some users don't have to go into the waiting room. Mine is set right now to everyone will go in the waiting room, and I would just keep it there. I think it's easier to just have everyone do the same thing. But if you wanted to change it, if I go to edit options, who should go into the waiting room, you can change it from everyone to users not in your account, or users who are not in your account and not part of the allowed domains. I think Randy would have to be the one to set up allowed domains. I'm not sure what he's done with that. But I believe when we say users not in your account, I don't think that includes the edText. I think it might just be for paid accounts. I've never really played around with this setting, but it is there. Another thing that you're supposed to be able to do that I have never gotten to work is customize waiting room. So supposedly you can go in here, and if you see that most meetings when you go in, you've got this generic, the meeting will be starting shortly or whatever, blah, blah, blah. You have the ability with a paid account to customize this. So I've tried putting in this. I've tried even adding a picture, and then there's some smaller text that you can edit down here as well. But I don't seem to have ever been able to make it work. And I'm not sure why, but it's there. If you get it to work, please let me know so I can figure out what I'm doing wrong. This next one, require a passcode when scheduling new meetings. This basically, when you go to schedule something, when this is checked, then when you're setting up the meeting, the passcode will be checked. And you would have to turn it off, versus if I set it to this, then when I go to set up a new meeting, the passcode is off and I have to turn it on. I definitely think we want to make sure that especially where we're working with kids, I think we definitely want to have passcodes on all of our stuff, so this would probably be a good one to keep on. Require a passcode for instant meetings is kind of a similar deal. Require a passcode for personal meeting ID. That was where we were just talking about the personal room. And so this gives you the ability to make it so that, do you want everybody to always have to enter a password to go into your personal meeting room? Or do you just want to make it so that if you have join before host turned on, that they would only have to enter a password if they've joined before you. But once you're in the meeting, they would be able to get in without having to enter a password. Embed passcode and invite link for one-click join. We were just talking about that in the personal meeting room. So if I turn this off and I go back up to my personal meeting room, meetings, there we go. Now if you take a look, do you notice how that last part of it is missing? The question mark PWD equals and then all the gobbledygook, right? So that's what that setting that I just unchecked does. So now, if you're copying and pasting this into an email to somebody, you're not going to have that last part to include in it, and then they're going to have to enter in a password. So that's what that one does. And I like to keep that on because I can always just not include the last part if I really wanted to. Require passcode for participants joining by phone. If they're joining by phone, there's a number that they have to enter, and then there's a meeting ID and a passcode. So if you turn this off, then they don't have to do that second part. But if they have your meeting ID and enter that in, then they'd be able to get in. We talked about these a little bit already in the personal meeting room, so I'm not really going to go over those. So schedule settings, again, a lot of these look familiar with what we were just talking about in the personal meeting room. You can start the meeting with the video on. You can have the participants start the meeting with the video on. We talked about audio on the telephone versus computer or both. Join before host. Enable personal meeting ID. So you could just disable that completely and not have a personal meeting room. Use personal ID when scheduling a meeting. What this means is, and we're going to talk about scheduling in a little bit, it is what is the default that it's going to use. So if I turn this on, then when I go to schedule a meeting, it's going to start with my personal meeting ID, and then I could change it to something else if I wanted to. This means it's going to start with something else, and I would have to change it to my personal meeting ID if I wanted to. Nothing keeps you from going from one to the other. It's just what is there by default when you go to do it. Mute participants upon entry. We talked about that as well. And then upcoming meeting reminder, where most of us are using either iPads or Android tablets or Chromebooks, there really isn't any use for this because this only works on Mac and Windows. But if you have Mac or Windows and this is on, then you'll get a little notification box in the top corner or bottom corner if you're on Windows, letting you know, hey, this is your 10-minute reminder for your Zoom meeting. A lot of what we've talked about so far, so the waiting room, audio on or off, video on or off, a lot of those things are things that you can change once you're in the meeting. The next couple of things that we're going to talk about are things that you can't change when you're in a meeting. So however you have it configured in here, that's how it's going to be in the meeting. So the only way to change it would be to end your meeting, go in, change the setting, and then start your meeting again. The first one is chat. So what this basically means is when this is on, when users come in, there's going to be a chat button on their bottom toolbar. If you turn this off, then there won't be a chat icon. So if you don't want the use of chat, then you would uncheck this. What you can change in a meeting, excuse me, and I hope that you can see my group chat window here that I've dragged into this screen, is you can change how people chat. So you can say participant can chat with no one, which in that case, it kind of turns chat off again. Host only, everyone publicly, or everyone publicly and privately. So, so you can adjust how, but if you're in your settings and you turn this off, then you're not going to get this option. So it's one of those things that it's probably better to just leave on here because you could always turn it off in your meeting. Prevent participants from saving chat. So that is one thing that when this is checked, they don't have that save option. I'm not sure that I've ever been in a meeting where I've been able to save a chat, but that's the setting that controls that. Private chat. So if you've noticed in a lot of your meetings that in like the Zoom group chat box, you can select who else. You can drop the two drop down, and you can find somebody and you can send a private message to them so it doesn't show up in the rest of the chat. So that's also something you can turn off, meaning that the only way to put anything in the chat is for it to be public and everyone can see it. So those are a couple of things that that you want to kind of have done in your settings, because they're a little bit hard to work with once you're in a meeting. We have a couple of other settings too that we'll talk about in a minute that if they're on in the settings, they're on. If they're off, and you can't change it in the meeting. Sound notification when someone joins or leaves. So that's that little ding that sometimes you hear if you're joining a meeting, and you might hear when someone else joins a meeting. I personally hate that sound. I have it on for the purposes of the waiting room piece, so I don't forget if I don't lose track if there's someone in the waiting room. And you can turn that chime on and off in the meeting, but the piece that you can't control is this part right here, the play sound for. I was in a webinar, or I was in a Zoom meeting one time, and there was like 150 people in it. And they were trying to like run this meeting, but they had play sound for everyone on. So all I was hearing was just dings, constant dings. And it made it really hard to pay attention to what was going on in the meeting. And I basically just kind of left because I was so annoyed about it. So I like this option, host and co-host only. So that way, when you join or when someone else joins, you don't hear that ding, which I like. I like not hearing the ding as much as humanly possible. So that's where that setting is. So again, you can turn it off in the meeting, but if it's on for, it's either on for everyone or off for everyone, or on for the host or off for the host. That part you can't change. You have to set that here how you want it to. This option here, if someone joins by phone, this basically adds another prompt to that process of getting into the Zoom meeting, where after they enter the meeting ID and the passcode, if you have that enabled, then it's going to ask them to basically record their voice almost as if they were setting a voicemail meeting. And then you would hear that when they come in, because when they're joining by a phone number, you're not going to see a name, you're just going to see the phone number. So this option here makes it so that you can actually figure out who that person is, because it's definitely a little bit sketchy to have someone in your Zoom room with a number and you have no idea who they are. Let's see, what else? We're gonna scroll a little bit. Oh, here we go. Co-hosting and polling are also things that that you have to set in here in order to access them in the meeting. So the ability to add co-hosts, which gives them the same ability to control the meeting as the host. If you turn that off, then you can't set a co-host in the meeting once you're in a meeting. Polling, it adds a polling feature, which I don't know. I'm going to screenshot my toolbar because I don't know if I drag it over whether you'll see it or not. So we'll do this here. So basically, if polling is on, then when you create a meeting, when you're hosting a meeting, you'll have a polling box show up in here. and you can create a poll. I like to just keep these on because you don't have to use them. It just gives you the ability to use them if you need to use them. If polling's off, then this icon doesn't show up. And if you suddenly wanted to create a poll, you wouldn't be able to. Let's see, what else? Screen share. This is, you can change this in the meeting. If you go, if you're not sharing your screen, there's a little triangle that shows up like right here, and you can go into advanced settings and set who can share. So this is one where I actually like to keep this as host only, because most of the time I'm not going to be allowing someone else to share. So if I need to do that, then I can turn it on. But if I have it to all participants and I forget to turn it off and someone shares something they're not supposed to, then I'm kind of in trouble, aren't I? Disable desktop screen share. So I don't want to completely make it so that they can't share their screen. So I'm going to leave that off. But I am going to say that only the host can share. Annotation and whiteboard. We're going to be talking more about these in a little bit. If you've only used Chrome on a, if you've only used Chrome on a Zoom book, if you've only used Zoom on a Chromebook, these are actually features that do not work in the Chromebook version of it. They are, however, features that work in the tablet version, either for iPads or Androids. So when we get into our discussion of using Zoom on the iPad, I will demonstrate that a little bit. So these are options that you can keep on, but just know that if you're on a Chromebook, you're not going to see these options. You will see it if you're on a Mac or PC. So I'm on a Mac, so you can see in the toolbar that I put here, I do have an annotate button. You may want to do some checks with this, though, because your students are going to have iPads too, so they're going to be able to annotate. So where it says only the user who is sharing can annotate, you're probably going to want to keep that on. Unless for some reason you have an activity where you all want them to be able to annotate or draw at the same time. When you go to screen share something, or when you go to share a whiteboard, having annotation on with this checked off means that they can all draw on the screen at the same time, which sounds a lot like chaos. Whiteboard allows saving of whiteboard content. That might be a good thing to have if you're working with a student one-on-one using the whiteboard. That might be a good thing to have. So just gives you another option for what to do. Also, I should note, because one thing that I tried, and this might be something that you want to do as far as your Zoom setups, is you might actually want to use your tablet and your Chromebook. And I mean that in the sense of that when you're screen sharing on your Chromebook, or actually on your iPad, either one, you can't see the video of who else is in your call. So this might actually be where having both going can help in the sense of you'll be able to see those cameras on a different device. If you wanted to share your Chromebook screen, you could also do that. You'd be able to see it from your iPad. Unfortunately, you cannot annotate a Chromebook screen share. So if you're sharing your screen from your Chromebook, you can't go on your iPad and annotate it, which is unfortunate, but just so you know. We're gonna scroll some more. Breakout rooms, same thing. Keep it on so that it's an option that you have. You don't have to use the breakout rooms, but if you wanted to use a breakout room and this was off, then you're going to have to close your meeting and change this and start over. So just something might as well keep on. I guess the last thing under settings that I was going to talk about, virtual backgrounds. This may be something, I know some people really like their virtual backgrounds. You may have someone savvy enough to put something in their virtual background that's not appropriate, so do consider that. You can turn that on or off. We're going to scroll some more here. Live streaming. If you wanted, which I'm doing right now, I'm live streaming to YouTube or for Facebook or whatever. Having this checked, same thing as some of the other options. It doesn't mean that you're automatically live streaming everything to YouTube. It just gives you that option. So with this on, when I started this meeting, under more, there's an option that says start live stream or start YouTube live stream or something like that. And I clicked on it and it opened a separate window and it got that whole thing going. So if live streaming is something that you think you might use for one reason or another, have it on or have it enabled, and so that way it's there if you want to go use it. Email notifications. So depending on what you want to get notified for, you can turn those on and off. When a cloud recording is available, we're going to talk about recording in a second. When attendees join meeting before host, when meeting is canceled, whatever. You can read those and determine for yourself how you want to be emailed with your notifications for things. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about recording, because if you're using an iPad or a Chromebook to record, your options are much more limited than they are on a Mac or a Windows PC. But we'll take a look in there real quick. So obviously local recording, that means that the Zoom meeting records and it creates a video file on your computer. So this is a feature that is not, if you're running on an iPad or a Chromebook, this option doesn't do anything. You can't record locally, you can only record on the cloud. Cloud recording just means that it's saving on a Zoom server, and then after the meeting you'll get a link. You'll get an email with a link to access that recording online. And if you wanted to download it or put it in Google Drive or something like that, you'd have that option later. So with cloud recording, you can decide what you want to be recorded. Do you want just whoever is speaking at that time with the shared screen, if you're sharing a screen? This just means that only one person will be on the screen. Do you want to make it so that when you're sharing a screen, that the whole gallery view, so that you can see all of the people in the call? Record active speaker, gallery view, and shared screen separately. What this would actually mean is that it would create two separate video files of your meeting. One would have, I think it would be active speaker and shared screen, and the other would be, maybe it's three, I'm not sure. I haven't played around with this that much. Record an audio only file. What that means is when you're done recording, in your when you get the link to your recording in the email, you have the option of downloading two files. You can download the video that has the audio in it, or you can do just the audio. You can also save your chat messages, meaning that you'll have a third file when you're done recording, which is your chat log. Then there's other things that you can do here. You can add a timestamp, can decide whether people's names show up in the recording, or thumbnails, or optimizing recording for a third-party video editor. You're not going to need to worry about that. So there's other settings, but none of them are really too important. The biggest thing to know in recording is, which of these boxes do you want to check? What do you want to show up in that archive, basically? So that's recording. So we're going to talk about scheduling meetings now, and there are two ways to do this. We're gonna go over both. We're going to talk about scheduling a meeting from here, from Zoom, and scheduling a meeting from Google Calendar. And we'll talk about how to make those two things talk to each other. So we're going to start from here because it gives you a little bit more customization of how you want to do things. So I'm going to schedule a meeting. And I can give it a name. So so my Zoom meeting. Description. This is good to have if you're doing something. We'll talk about registration real quick. So a lot of Zoom meetings that you've probably been in, you've had to register for that meeting. So if you require registration, when you save it, you'll get a registration link that it'll send out, and then it will bring you to a page that's going to have the name of your Zoom meeting and your description, and then the sign up information below that they have to enter. So obviously, if you don't put anything in here, then they're not going to see anything. They're just going to see the title. So if you're going to require registration for something, it might be good to give people a sense of what they're registering for. So you may want to use that. We talked about meeting templates. So I have two saved. I could choose either one of those two, and then whatever settings I have configured for those templates will automatically copy over to this meeting. Or I could just leave it blank. So now you're going to say when your meeting is. So I can set a date. I'm going to click on the calendar. Sunday, why not? Let's have a meeting on Sunday. Set a time. Let's see. I'm sure everyone will have an 11 p.m. meeting on a Sunday. One thing I noticed, and I haven't found any way to change this, is that you can only schedule in half-hour increments. So if you wanted to schedule something at like 10:15, and I tried this over and over again, it gets rid of it. You can only schedule in half-hour increments. Now, there's nothing that's keeping you from changing the time that it's scheduled in Google Calendar. So if you're planning on creating a meeting and sending an invite out via Google Calendar, at least if you're doing a 10:15, you can set it in Google Calendar to 10:15. But on the Zoom side, you can only schedule it for 10 or 10:30. And you can start it at any time. You don't have to, if you're trying to do something at 10:15 and you schedule it for 10:30, you're not going to have to wait until 10:30 to actually start the meeting. You can start it whenever. But for whatever reason, for this scheduling piece, you can only do half-hour increments. Then you can set what the duration is. Is it a 1-hour meeting? Is it a 5-hour meeting? Is it a 5-hour and 15-minute meeting? You can't make it a 5-hour and 2-minute meeting. But you can set that. So obviously, if you're setting an 11 p.m. start, it's going to schedule from 11 to 12. Your time zone, shouldn't have to change that. It should recognize your time zone automatically. Recurring meeting. So if this is a meeting that's happening over and over, which I can think of a couple that you'd be doing over and over, then you can set a recurring meeting. I would do it here. I would set your recurring meeting here, because when you go to add it to Google Calendar, it knows that it's a recurring meeting and it will add it to your calendar accordingly. So you don't have to go set it up there instead. So when we check this, we're saying, is this happening daily? Is it happening weekly or monthly, or even no fixed time? So my virtual office hours, I set as a recurring meeting to no fixed time, which just means whenever I feel like starting a meeting, I'm going to start a meeting. But if I said we're going to do weekly, now we can say, is it every week? Is it every other week? Is it every other? Is that how you would say it for 3 weeks? Tri-weekly? Every 4 weeks? Whatever. You've got the ability to determine the weekly frequency of it. Same thing if it were daily. Is it happening every day, every other day, every 3 days, so on and so forth? And then I can choose what day does it occur on if I'm doing weekly. Does it happen Monday, Wednesday, Friday? Does it happen Tuesday? Does it happen every day except Thursday? Seems weird, but okay, you could do that. And then you can set an end date. When is this recurring meeting going to stop happening? And you can either set the end date, or you could say it's going to happen this many times, and then it's going to end. So we talked about registration. So you can require it or not require it. If you require it, if it's a recurring meeting, you get these additional options. You can make it so they only have to register once and can attend any of the occurrences. So if they register for the first thing on a Monday, then they can also get it on a Tuesday. They don't have to register for that one too. Attendees need to register for each occurrence to attend, or attendees register once and can choose one or more occurrences to attend. This might be an option that you use if you're planning on doing virtual parent-teacher conferences or something along those lines, where you might set a bunch of possible times and then see which one that they actually choose to attend. Maybe not. I haven't really played around with that, so maybe that's a bad idea. I don't know. If it's not a recurring meeting, then none of these options show up. You just check the box and you go. Once you hit save, then you're going to see a registration link right in this area where I'm waving my cursor back and forth. And then you would email that link to people so that they could register. You can set a passcode if you want. You can enable a waiting room if you want. So these things, remember we were talking about in settings that these were things that we turned on for when we create a new meeting and we have to turn off. So if I had changed those and made it so that those are both flipped off, then these would both be unchecked and I'd have to check them for them to be in place. Same thing with host and participant. This is the default I set in settings, but I can change it. Audio, this is the default, but I can change it. Meeting options, these were the defaults, but I can change them. So we've talked about a lot of these options already, so I'm not necessarily going to go through them again. I'm going to go ahead and save this meeting now. And so we're going to have an 11 p.m. meeting every week on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. I hope that sounds good to all of you. You'll see here's my registration link. I can copy that directly and put it and paste it into an email. I can start the meeting from here just by clicking Start This Meeting. The other piece that's really valuable is Add to Google Calendar. So once I do that, It's going to open in a new tab. You've got to give it permission to access your Google Calendar. And then now you have this convenient window where if you wanted it to be 10:45, now you can make it 10:45. It matters more what you've scheduled on your calendar so you know when to be there than what you've scheduled on Zoom. Because you can start and end that meeting at any time. And then you can send this invitation to other people through guests. You can add guests. And then they would get the email, they can add it to their calendar, so on and so forth. And I can hit save. And then once it's time for that meeting, I can that'll show up on the schedule eventually, but there it is. Look at all those meetings. And then I can just click on it to join. Now, one thing, I have this handy dandy button that says join Zoom meeting. And that's because I have an extension installed called the Zoom Scheduler. And I forgot to link to it on my website, but I think we're done with that. Let's go ahead and pull it up here, and I'll put the link in the chat. This is an extension that ties into your Google Calendar so that you can create Zoom meetings directly from your calendar and also have that convenient join button for a meeting that is in your calendar already from Zoom. So it makes it a little bit easier to access rather than trying to dig through to find the link. So now that I'm in Google Calendar, if I wanted to schedule something from here, I'm going to go create. I'm going to create my event. And now I have this handy dandy button that says make it a Zoom meeting. And I can make it a Zoom meeting. And that's all I have to do. I now have a link. By the way, it uses your personal meeting room. Just a heads up. The one thing that's really weird about this, and I sort of discovered this by accident, is for some reason, if you have waiting room enabled in your personal meeting room settings, let's find it here. Let's go to meetings. Let's go to personal room. So earlier, I had turned the waiting room on. For some reason, when you go and add an event or create an event from Google Calendar, it turns your waiting room off. I have no idea why. And it turns it off in your settings too. Because if you had it enabled, you'd see a check mark next to waiting room, but it's not there, so it's disabled. So just a heads up, if you're creating a meeting from Google Calendar and you want to use your waiting room, once you start the meeting, you're going to need to go into your security settings and enable that. Just a heads up, which is why I prefer to schedule things from the Zoom side. Is for whatever reason that weird thing happens. I wish I knew why, but I don't. We're going to talk about Zoom on iPad and Android versus Zoom on Chromebook. There are pros and cons to each. The pros on an iPad, because I know that we've been talking about, hopefully this will be a little bit of a solution to the issues we've had with Zoom on our Chromebooks. So I'm happy to announce, or happy to confirm, it works much better on the iPads. We don't have the same level of stuttering and bogging down and lagging that we do on the Chromebooks. So just from a standard participation standpoint, if you're just going to be in a regular meeting, like a staff meeting or whatever, it's probably going to work better to use your iPad for it. The other piece was that you can screen share a whiteboard and draw on it. So this is a feature that is not available on the Chromebook. So I actually want to demonstrate that really quickly. So I'm going to open up Zoom here. And this is the Zoom app. So when you get here, normally this is where it shows up. You can start a new meeting right on command, right there. Or you can join one if you have the code. You can start a meeting with a shared screen, or you can schedule a new meeting here. To see your schedule of meetings, you're going to go to this, to meetings right here. I'm trying to click on something that's on my iPad screen. And so I can join one of these meetings right now. Or actually, let's join a different one, because I don't know if I can dual share. Here we go. Hey, we're going to call using internet audio. I'm going to turn the audio off, though. And so up in the top right corner, you've got an option that says share content. Now, you've got some different options as far as sharing on an iPad that you would not have on a Chromebook. And the one on the bottom is Whiteboard. So I'm going to pull that up, and now I have, very conveniently, a whiteboard, or a basically just a drawing screen. And I've got some annotation tools at the bottom. I've got a pen tool, which I can either have the pen tool on or the eraser tool. Is it going to work? Hold on. Oh, because I haven't erased anything. So I can. This is cool. So I've got some different options. So now I can draw. Okay. I can change the color of my pen. So now it's red. I am a great teacher. And I can also erase stuff. So right there. And now I'm just kind of scribbling with my stylus here to erase that very mean message. Have some additional options here, which I honestly haven't really played around with any of them. It looks like there's a text tool. So I can add some text to it if I wanted to. I think this is the width of what I'm drawing. I might be wrong. Nope, that's exactly it. So if you want a wider draw, that's this piece right here. I'm about to find out. This looks like it draws with a little bit of transparency, so maybe like a highlighter tool. Oh, that's a laser pointer. Check that out. So I'm just basically pressing down on the screen with my stylus, and it's following around like a laser pointer. And then it looks, this last option here is to select. So I just tapped on this little piece, and now it's made a little select box, and I can move it around and put it wherever I want. So, and I can also delete it by hitting the trash can. Actually, that deletes the whole page. So there we go. You can also add pages. So if this is page 1, I can go here and add a page 2. And then I can go back to my page 1. It says at the bottom you can create up to 12 of these. So that's pretty cool. I don't know, can I? Ooh. I'm on my computer, I can annotate. That's pretty cool. All right. Need to stop playing around with this. I get distracted. So this is your whiteboard. So once you're done with the whiteboard, if you just tap at the top where that little caret is, and then you would just hit stop share. So that's the whiteboard. I think that you probably could find quite a bit of use with your students working remotely on something like this. So we talked about can screen share a whiteboard and draw on it. You can annotate on another user's shared screen, but it's not available on Chromebooks. So if I was sharing my desktop here from my MacBook, and I was connected in that same meeting on my iPad, I could draw on my screen. And it would actually show up on my screen too, which is pretty cool. Cons of Zoom on the iPad. So you cannot see other participants when you're sharing the screen, which you can't do on Chrome either, but on desktop versions you can. So this might be a reason to actually go with both, is you can have participants on one screen and your screen share on the other. You also cannot create or manage breakout rooms on an iPad. You can do it on a Chromebook and any other device, but not on an iPad or Android. And you cannot live stream from the iPads. So I couldn't do what I'm doing here on YouTube with an iPad. So pros and cons of using it on a Chromebook. It is a more similar experience vis-a-vis other laptops. So if you've used it on a Windows laptop, you use it on a Mac, the experience of Zoom is going to look more like what most other people who use Zoom see. So it's a little bit more translatable. And you can create and manage breakout rooms. So that you can do on Chrome. Cons, as we've discussed, they don't work so great. So, and that's not necessarily an all Chromebook issue. It's an our Chromebook issue, but the performance is not great. Whiteboard or annotation features are not available. You also cannot see other participants when you're sharing your screen, and you cannot live stream from the Chromebooks. So that's the comparison of iPads and Chromebooks.